Previously on Trace Velo.
Now, I have only done a couple of miles on this group set so far, but I will definitely be keeping it on my bike from here on out, basically. So the hands of time will tell if it holds up, 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 if it holds up. Hello and welcome back to another overwhelmingly mediocre Trace Velo production. My name, as always, is it's Luke. So let's get right down to it. A couple of videos ago, I did an install and a kind of initial test of the Sensah Empire group set. I was super excited to kind of get it installed. 11-speed group sets are generally pretty pricey. So I was raring to get this group set slapped onto my bike here. This group set is cheap. It's Chinese and it's lightweight. So it ticks all the boxes. And I plan to come and do a kind of an update video with you guys after I'd put about 2,000 miles on it or something like that. But I'm here after around 500. So a little bit sooner than expected. And here's why. So a few days ago on the weekend, one of the shifters for this group set, specifically the shifter for the front derailleur here, just straight up fucking broke on me, basically. I was cycling along and the shifting on the front derailleur started to get really mushy. Basically, I was stuck in the small chainring and it wouldn't shift properly into the big ring. So I pulled over to the side of the road and tried to shift it there a few times, and then this happened. Right, so I was out in Surrey just on a ride, and one of the shifters broke. So it was the shifter for the front derailleur, and this little lever arm which sits in here, it's made of plastic and it's just snapped right off. You can see there the plastic's just sheared. So I'm running one by. So I've got a one by setup now. Just the rear is working currently. So yeah, always look on the bright side, eh? Never used one by before, so now's a great time. You can see there, you can see in the bottom that little piece of plastic there. Doesn't exist on this one anymore because it's in my hand. Anyway, bit of a pain, but I'll get over it. So the shifting on the rear cassette using this shifter here is still fully functional, as I mentioned. So I was kind of able to finish the ride. But yeah, having got back home and had a look at the piece which basically fell out of this shifter, it's pretty obvious why this happened. Okay, so this is the broken shifter here, and I've taken the rubber hood off the top so I can show you things a little bit clearer. And this is the plastic arm which failed. It's the broken part that you saw earlier, and I've kind of jammed it back inside so I can demonstrate how it would work if this shifter was still functional. Now, it sat in basically the place it would be if it was working, although this plastic arm would actually be flush with that little plastic insert there on the lever arm. And the way it works is when you want to make a shift, be that up or down, you push on the lever arm and you can see there it actuates against this little piece of plastic, the bit that broke. This piece of plastic pivots around a shaft, which is in the body of the shifter here, and it actuates the ratchet mechanism, which is that little gold piece of metal there. That's the ratchet mechanism, which then either extends or retracts the gear cable. Now, the issue is when you make an upshift, it requires quite a lot of force, and it requires you to press quite hard against the shift lever. And basically, all that force is transmitted through this small plastic arm here. So let me take this out and you'll be able to quite clearly see why it broke. Okay, so this is the small plastic lever arm, which snapped off and fell out of the shifter back there. And it's got two loops on it. And the loop at the front here is in several pieces, but I've quite crudely taped it back together so you can see what it would look like. And these two loops pivot around a shaft inside the shifter body here, which I'll show you a picture of. And you can see the plastic has just snapped there and it's snapped at the back there. The actual ratchet mechanism inside the shifter here is still fully functional. It's just that, yeah, this small piece of plastic which transmits the force of your hand required to make a shift, it's just not durable enough, and yeah, it's completely busted. Now, looking at this part in a little bit of detail, I can instantly see why they chose to make it out of plastic. It's quite a complicated kind of shape, and to produce this out of metal, especially if it was machined out of a single billet or block of metal, would be a very expensive process. You could potentially produce this as a sintered metal part, but again, given the complicated nature of the shape, I'm not even sure that's possible. But anyway, regardless, making it out of plastic, you can just injection mold it into kind of whatever shape you need. Really straightforward, and most importantly, a super cheap process, keeping the costs of manufacture for this part very low. The issue is that shifting from the small chainring into the large chainring on this Sensah setup does require quite a lot of force, and I found that the cable tensions required to kind of move the derailleur arm and make the shift from small chainring into big chainring, those cable tensions need to be quite high, and this was actually supported by a couple of the comments I had on the installation video, where people mentioned that the SRAM-esque shifting does require quite high cable tensions to kind of function reliably. I mean, the actual spring inside the front derailleur here, it's actually quite stout, and you could really feel this when you were shifting from the big ring back down into the small chain ring. The shifting really walloped quite violently down the trim positions, and you can sort of hear that in this clip. Okay, so the clip I was going to show didn't really do it justice, but now I've got this front derailleur in my hands, you can really feel how strong this spring is. I mean, you've properly got to wrench on it to get any movement out of this front derailleur. This spring is incredibly strong. The thing is though, because of this, it actually felt really satisfying to use this group set while you were out and riding. The shifts at the front felt nice and precise, kind of nice, quick, sharp downshifts. It's just a real shame that the actual parts and the construction inside the shifter itself weren't quite robust enough to handle it. Now, the cable tensions for the rear derailleur are generally much lower, and the force required to actuate an upshift, even towards the kind of upper ranges of the cassette here, where the cable tensions are generally a little bit higher. The force required to actuate an upshift is still nowhere near as much as is required to actuate an upshift on the front derailleur here. And the shifter for the rear derailleur is constructed in exactly the same way really, and it's got the same plastic arm to actuate the shifting. But I suspect this little arm here will hold up a lot better, purely because the tensions required to shift at the back are just so much lower. Now, I was kind of hoping that this was kind of an isolated incident, and maybe my shifter was an anomaly and it was from like a bad batch or something like that. But I posted this issue on my Instagram a couple of days ago, and a guy called Paul got in touch, and he had exactly the same issue. So you can see in one of his pictures here, the small plastic arm is in the wrong position. It's kind of sat in the middle, whereas it should kind of sit at rest over here, flush with the lever arm. I was chatting to him on Instagram at this point, and then literally 2 seconds later, he undid the bolt here for the front derailleur to kind of release the tension from the setup. And then this little thing fell out of the shifter. Yeah, so you should be able to see the plastic arm has failed in exactly the same manner as my one did. So yeah, not cool. Not cool, guys. Not cool. So my Sensah setup here lasted a measly 500 miles, there or thereabouts, before it busted completely. But having said all of this, I've seen comments from several different people on some of my videos and also on my Instagram post that have been using these Sensah setups for thousands and thousands of miles without running into any issues really. So you might not have these issues at all, but if you've just bought yourself a set or you've got a Sensah setup, I have 2 pieces of advice for you which may help you avoid this issue. So first up, lubricate the front derailleur here. So about a week before this Sensah setup just busted on me, I was out riding and I ran into a little issue, and I actually filmed it, so check this out. Okay, so I was out on a ride and the front derailleur failed me. I was about 15 miles in, so it wasn't a big deal, but a little bit annoying, but I'll show you what's wrong. Click it twice and the derailleur barely moves, and you have to kind of push it in to get it to drop down. The cable at the back here is loose, but you still have to push it in. So I have a feeling it's because there's no factory lubrication in the top here, but I guess we'll find out. Yeah, quite annoying really.
A few moments later.
Okay, so got it fixed. Yeah, as I thought, there was no lubrication around it, so this is the equivalent of WD-40. So put a bit of that on and just some 3-in-1 oil, kind of put it around the moving parts, and now I'll quickly show you. Bada bing, moves on its own, so moves freely now. But yeah, not a great sign of quality really when there's absolutely no factory lubrication in the moving parts here. It makes me wonder about the shifters actually, whether they've got any lubrication in them. The derailleur had some in, but for some reason this didn't. Anyway, it's fixed now, so yeah, let's see if it lasts. So yeah, definitely lubricate the front derailleur here, as it doesn't appear to come with any lubrication on it from the factory, which is a bit crap, to be honest with you. But yeah, that will drastically reduce the tension required to kind of make an upshift. You could also use Teflon coated gear cables if you've got those lying around. Basically anything that will reduce the amount of cable tension required to make an upshift on the front derailleur is going to help you out. But a second and potentially better option would be to not use the front derailleur included in the Sensah Groupset at all really. So it's a yaw style front derailleur, very similar to the kind of style used by SRAM, and seemingly inherent in its design. It requires kind of quite a lot of force to actuate that upshift. In this video by China Cycling, which is a fantastic channel by the way, and yeah, I've linked it down in the video description, so you should go and check it out after this. Joe, the guy running the channel, he reviewed the Sensah Empire Groupset last year, and he also stated that he was having issues with the stock front derailleur and said that swapping it out for a Shimano branded one made a world of difference. He specifically stated that he'd tried a Shimano 4700 front derailleur and that made things much better apparently, and I can see why. So on the Tiagra 4700 front derailleur, the actual arm here, this arm which actuates the shift, it's a lot longer, you can see it's a lot longer than the one that's included on the Sensah setup. So presumably due to lever action, it's a lot easier to kind of actuate the upshift. It certainly feels easier. I mean, it's a shame I can't test it myself considering I've got it right here, but the front shifting mechanism on my setup is completely knackered, unfortunately. But yeah, if you are installing a Sensah Empire Groupset on your bike and you have a Shimano front derailleur lying around, I would suggest you probably install the Shimano one over the one included with the Sensah Empire Groupset. But I mean, even if you don't have a Shimano one lying around, a 4700 front derailleur like this is super cheap, like 20 quid new, and yeah, even less if you get it on the second-hand market. So overall, not a great result here, which is such a shame. I was actually really enjoying using this group set. I mean, had it have been reliable, it would have been a fantastic way to drop some of the cost out of a bike build. I mean, the shifting was nice, it was sharp and positive, it ran quietly. I mean, it's just a shame that, yeah, it catastrophically failed a few days ago. Interestingly though, another Instagram commenter going by Mike, he mentioned that he had run into a very similar issue with his Campagnolo Centaur 10-speed group set a few years back. And he sent me this picture, and you'll be able to see that the lever arm for the front derailleur has snapped clean off. It's made of plastic and it clearly couldn't handle the tensions required for an upshift. And apparently this is a bit of a known issue with some of the Campagnolo group sets. So yeah, it just goes to show that even the big manufacturers make mistakes like this sometimes. I mean, from a manufacturer's point of view, when you're kind of chasing lower weights and potentially lower costs that you could, you know, pass back onto the consumer, using plastics in the construction of these kind of parts must be very tempting. It's just that in this case, the longevity of the product wasn't really there. But let me quickly show you the Tiagra shifter, which has lasted 20 odd thousand miles and is still going strong. And I'll show you why it didn't face the same problems. So this is the Tiagra shifter for the front derailleur, and I've removed this little plastic cover here so you can see the inner workings a little bit better. And you engage an upshift in much the same way as the Sensah setup, I suppose. So this is the brake lever and you roll it inwards to engage an upshift. The difference being, however, is that the part that it actuates against is this metal arm here. Now the cable tensions for Shimano Tiagra at the front are higher than they are at the rear, so same as Sensah. But the choice of materials and the kind of construction are just much more robust for the Tiagra shifter here. It leads to a higher advertised weight, but yeah, looking at these components, you can kind of see why Shimano are so renowned for their bulletproof shifters. So there we have it, a pretty spectacular failure for the Sensah Empire group set, which really bummed me out, if I'm honest with you, because I love being able to kind of find lower cost alternatives that do the job. But yeah, in this case, I'd probably steer clear. I mean, it's funny because I actually had another identical version of this group set in my basket on AliExpress, ready to buy for another potential build I've got. But after this, I'll probably be looking elsewhere. It's kind of like I mentioned in the last video that I uploaded. You're not always guaranteed quality with these cheaper bike components. I mean, often they work pretty well, they perform well straight out of the box, but then develop issues later down the line once you've put some miles on them. And that's exactly what happened here with this Sensah Empire group set. It developed, yeah, it's developed some issues. But yeah, if you've bought this group set, or maybe you've just freshly installed it, don't fret too much. Like I said, try and reduce cable tensions at the front wherever you can. And yeah, maybe if you've got a Shimano front derailleur lying around, possibly install that instead of the one that comes stock with the Sensah group set. Ladies and gents, we're done. We're finished. The episode's done. There's nothing left. So yeah, subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and if you've got any questions or any comments about this really disappointing group set, then yeah, throw them down in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to as many of you as I can, really. So yeah, that's all, and I'll see you in the next episode.